Okay. So what we want to do is we want to create a function called myLastIndexOf, okay? And it's going to accept up to 3 arguments: an array, a search value, and a starting index. So an optional starting index, right? And so from this, you can kind of tell, like, an array is like a collection of things, right? And so the search value is probably the thing that you want to find in here, right? And then this optional thing is, we'll get into that, right? But we basically want to find this inside of this, right? It's another like needle in a haystack problem. So myLastIndexOf should return the last index at which the search value appears in the array. Okay, so it should return the last index at which it appears, right? So in this example, right? In this function call, how many arguments are being passed into this function? How many? 2, right? 1, this big array, and then 2. So there's 2 total things that it's given. And the fact that this first thing has a bunch of stuff in it doesn't mean it's like more than one thing, right? This is one thing. It's one box full of stuff. And then this is another thing. And we want to see if this is in here somewhere. Specifically, if it is in here, we want to find the last index at which it appears. So G, the last instance of G is actually here, right? It's not here. This is the last time it occurs. And so this should return 3 as the last index in which this occurs. Why? Because the index is 0, 1, 2, 3. So we want to give 3 back, okay? And if you have a case where you're trying to find something and that thing doesn't exist in this array, right? You want to return -1. And -1 just means I haven't found it in this array, okay? Any questions on the first 2 examples? Does that make sense? We want to look for something, right? And if we find it, we want to find the last time it occurs, not the first time. Okay. And then there's this kind of like bonus question where if a third argument is passed in, right, this optional thing, that's called a start index, right? And if that's passed in, right, your function should start looking from that index. Okay, so what does that mean? Here we have the girls bring the boys out, right? And we want to find the word the. And without this 2, you would normally say, okay, this the occurs here. That's the last time it occurs, right? But if you add this optional case, right, what the question's asking you to do is, okay, now start looking from this index. So what is 2? 0, 1, 2. Boom. So now imagine the array is just like these 3 things, and this is where you're going to start looking, and you're going to go this way. Okay? So you're going to look for the word the. Boom, found it there. And so this should return 0. Okay? So to quickly recap, just like the strategy of solving this is you should look for this thing starting from the back, the last index, and go this way. That's what we're going to try to do, okay? We're going to start from here and then go this way, and once we find something, we're like, okay, that's the last index in which this occurs, right? You could start from the beginning, but that's kind of like a waste of time, right? Because you want the last instance of this, right? So start from the back and we're going to go forward. And then we're just, by default, going to start from the back, right? Unless they give us this optional third index. Unless they tell us, hey, don't start from the back. Start from here, right? And then go forward this way. Don't start all the way from back here, right? So that's how we're going to bring in this last case. Does that make sense? But either way, we're always going to go from back to front. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay, great. Except for like, how do you solve this? Let's bring this in. Bring in this example. Okay, so this has to return 3, right? Because we're trying to find G in here. This is the third index. Okay, so let's do this. We'll say const my last index of equals like this. It's our function, and this function accepts how many arguments? 3 arguments, right? Third one's optional. So let's just do 2 for now, and so we'll say array and the search value. I'm just gonna call it a haystack and needle, right? Because we want to find this needle in our haystack. Okay, I'll call this array just to be a little clearer. Okay, so if I want to find this thing in here, what do we have to do? We have to loop through the array, right? I have to look through every single element of the array. Specifically, right? Specifically, I want to start from the back. I want to start from baby, okay, and go forward. So instead of doing for let I equals 0, right? What does I equals 0 signify? I equals 0 means the index, right? I means index. And we're going to start at index number 0. And we're going to do I++. Well, that's not what we want. We want to start from the back and go I minus minus, right? So we don't want to start at 0. We want to start at which index? Array.length minus 1. This is, I don't know if you remember from yesterday, this is always definitively going to be the last index of your array, no matter what, right? In this case, how many things do we have? 0, or we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 things in the array. What's the last index? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. The difference is 1. So this is how we get the last index, okay? So we're going to start from the last index. And then we're going to go until I hits what index?
0.
0, exactly. We're going to start from index number 5, and we're going to go 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So this is how you start from the back and you get to the front. Okay? And then instead of I++, we want I minus minus. So this is like start from the back and go to the front. And if I console log the I at every iteration, it'll give me all the indexes in this array, so we know we're on the right track, right? We start from the back and we're going to the front. And I want you guys to get into a habit of grabbing each element from an array. Whenever you iterate through an array, typically you're gonna want to know like what's at each index, right? Like these numbers don't mean that much to us. It's really like what is stored at that index that we care about, right? So how do you access something in an array by an index? You do array and then bracket notation and then the index. This is the actual thing at index 5 and index 4 and index 3. And you want to take this and you want to assign it to a variable, right? And we'll call this element, or I'll call it like L, short for element. And I'm just going to console log what is each element. We get all the elements from the back. Yes?
How necessary is it like why is it a good idea to define
to do this?
Yeah.
So yeah. So it's very likely that you're going to be accessing array at I multiple times, right? And if that in that situation, it's a lot cleaner to just call that thing L for what it is instead of doing array bracket I every time. And this gets more relevant if like you have a nested array. You have an array that has more arrays inside of it, right? Then you have to do like array bracket I bracket J or whatever, right? So yeah, it may not be immediately obvious, but if we get a good example, I'll show you like what the alternative would look like. So this is like each element, okay? And so now what we want to do is if the element, so if like baby, if that thing is equal to the thing we're looking for, which is needle, right? What do we want to return?
The index number?
The index, right? This means we found it. This means the thing, the word, matches the word that we're looking for. So we found it, and so we have to give back the current index, which is I. Awesome. Very cool. And you might think like, okay, now if I don't find it, right? If I don't find it, return -1. What's the problem with this? Why do we not want to do this?
That's redundant.
Yes, we're inside of the for loop, right? And this is the first check, right? We're looking at is the first thing we find, baby, is that equal to G, the thing we're looking for? Oh, it's not? It must not be in the array, -1, right? We've barely done anything. We just got started, and we're like, oh, the first thing I found isn't the thing, so so it's not in here. That doesn't make any sense, right? We want to keep looking. So setting up this if statement is really important, where you only need the first if. Where if you find it, that's when you return the index, right? Just because the thing you're looking at right now isn't the thing you're looking for, doesn't mean you should just be done. You have to keep looking, right? So you don't want this else. Instead, you want to wait until you're done with the for loop, right? This thing is going to run a bunch of times, okay? And let's say by the time I gets all the way down to 0, right? And we've looked at the whole array and we haven't returned yet. That kind of like implies that we've looked at everything and we haven't found the thing, and so outside of the for loop we can return -1, right? So finish looking and haven't returned yet, so that means we haven't found it. Okay. So if I'm looking for like B, right? We get -1 because it looks at all these things, gets to 0, the for loop finishes, and then we just return -1. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? The fact that it's going from the back to the front is not like it is very, very similar to like if you wanted to start from the front and go to the back. All you have to do is just start at I = 0 and then go until, right, I is less than array.length. This means you're going to go from the front to the back, right? So it's not a big difference. Okay. Now the tricky part is if they give us a third argument, right? If they give us a third argument. So we go here and we want to find the word the in this array, except we want to start looking from index 2. We're going to start looking from this index, bring, right? I'll just do this, 0, 1, 2, let's copy this, 3. Okay, so this is our indices, and we want to find the word the, except we're supposed to start at index 2, so we're supposed to start here, and then we're supposed to go forward, right? And we find it here. Okay, so let's introduce our third argument. This is our optional argument, and this is where we're going to start looking. Okay, you can call it start index, or you can call it start. So if they give us a start value, right? If they give us a start value, we want to start looking from there. We want to start looking from 2. We want to start looking not from the back, right? Not from here, but we want to start looking from 2. Start. Does that make sense? So this right here should be start, right? If they give us some place to start, we should put it here. But the problem is they might not give us. They might not give this to us, right? So the way you do this is you want to say if, right? If, let's see, if they don't give us a start value, as in if there's only 2 things, if they only give us the haystack and the needle, right? Where do you want to start? The last index, right? If they don't tell you, hey, I want you to start index 2, you're gonna assume that they want to start from the very back, right? So let's just give it that default value, right? So if a start isn't provided, right? Let's say start is array.length -1. So we're gonna expect some variable to come in here, okay? And if that variable is not given to us, right? We're gonna assume that the variable is just gonna default to the last index, and that's where we're gonna start looking, and we're gonna go forward. And so now we can take this, and then we can make it start, right? Because this is going to at least be array.length minus 1. It's at least going to be the very back element, right? But if it's not, if it is provided, let's say the number 2, then it's gonna use that. Okay. Cool. So this works. It found the word the in here. And so we can actually clean this up, and this actually isn't totally the right solution. There's a place where this doesn't work. But any questions on like what we did here? Does this make sense? Yeah.
Can you make default start array dot length minus 1?
Yes. Exactly. This thing.
Yeah.
Yes. You nailed it. So okay. So I think we went over this, but if you guys remember, right? ES6 ECMAScript version 6 introduced default variables. So if I have a function that says like log, and then this takes a number, and then this console logs a number, right? And I say log 100, right? Takes that. But if I don't give it anything, right? If I don't give it a number to log, it's gonna log undefined. And so I can say, okay, if you don't give me a number, right? I'm gonna default to 1. If you don't pass me anything, right? I'm just gonna assume that like 1 is good enough, okay? And then we're gonna run with that. But if you do give me something, I'm not gonna use 1. I'm gonna use the thing that you gave me. Does that make sense? Default arguments, ring a bell. Okay, so we can do that here, right? Like we're in a situation where, like, if start isn't provided, if start is not an argument that's provided to us, we're defaulting it to array.length minus 1, right? So we can just do this. So why does this work? Let's say they give us a start value. Let's say they say, okay, I want you to start at index 2. Are we going to use 2 or array.length minus 1? We're going to use 2, right? Because the whole point of this is like, if this is not given to us, we're going to use this. But if they do give us 2, like, hey, start at 2, then we're going to take 2. Start is going to be 2. And we go right here. And we start at I equals 2, right? We start at I equals 2, and then go forward. Okay? But if they don't give us a start value, right? Let's say they don't give us 2, like this. Then this function that's expecting 3 things, right, only gets 2 things. And so the third thing, we're just going to default and say, okay, you didn't give me a place to start, right? So I'm going to start from the back. Array.length minus 1. And that number 5 is going to go right here. Let's start from the back. Does that make sense? Awesome. Any questions? Cool. Notice we changed very few things from the previous step, right? Like before, it was like this. We didn't have the third argument, and it was just this, right? This is how to start from the back and go to the front. And just by doing this, right, making it start at start, and then giving a default variable to start, like we get this amazing new functionality of like a custom start position. Okay. Any questions on any part of this problem? Cool. Awesome. Okay. We'll stop this here. Oh, was I recording?